Welcome to the Love Lab Podcast, a safe place to get real about sex. Whether you're a man, woman, single, or couple, this is the show for you.
We are your hosts, Kevin Anthony and Céline Remy, and we are here to guide you to go from good to amazing in the bedroom and beyond.
All right, welcome back to the Love Lab Podcast. This is episode 140, and it's how to manage racial tension in a relationship. This is going to be interesting because we have never covered this on the show. So we are sex, love, and relationship. And so we cover pretty much any aspect of sex, love, or relationship. And one thing that we haven't covered yet in our 139 previous episodes is the topic of how to manage an interracial relationship. And so I think this is going to be really fascinating. And I think it is so relevant today. Just because there's so many interracial couples. And I think there's a lot of people that can benefit from hearing our guests today, their personal experience. They have another interesting twist in that they're not just an interracial couple, but they also are from extremely different cultures. So, you could be an interracial couple that grew up in the same town or in countries on the opposite side of the world.
I mean, I grew up in Switzerland, you grew up in the States, and that's different cultures sure.
So we have one aspect of that, but even still, like, our cultures aren't that much different. So, there's layers, right? There's different variations. So I think it's going to be a really fascinating conversation.
Yes. So before we start with introducing our guest, let's give a big shout out to our sponsors, Power and Mastery. So if you want to join the secret club of men who are great in bed, then check out Power and Mastery at powerandmastery.com. It is the most complete sexual mastery training for men. Whether you want to have harder erections, last longer, or increase your sexual skills, there is something for you at powerandmastery.com. Today we have Cera and Matthew. They are the hosts of the Interracial Couple podcasts and creators of the Lover's Journal. It's a guided journal for couples to map their relationship to greater love and harmony. So welcome, Cera and Matthew, to the Love Lab podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having us. Fantastic.
All right. So, we actually have a lot of questions. We have more questions this interview than we usually write. So we may not get to them all, but we'll do the best we can. And let's just dive right in. So the first thing that I would love for you guys to do is for each of you to take a turn to tell us a little something about your background. In other words, where did you grow up? What was your life like, prior to you guys being together? Because I kind of want to set the stage so people can understand just how different the worlds that you both came from really are.
Yeah, so I think I'll go first. So I grew up, my name is Cera, and I grew up in Kenya, in a small town. I don't even know if you can call it a town or if you could call it a village. It's a small village, I would say, in northern Kenya, the Rift Valley. And I lived in Kenya until I was 26 and moved to America when I was 26. And then I met Matthew a couple years after that in Los Angeles.
So tell us a little bit more, like what was life like growing up in Kenya?
Yeah, because I'm thinking, Africa, huts, no running water, like I'm going all the way crazy there. And maybe that's not at all that. You didn't have to go to the well and carry water. You're like, come on, this is like so outdated. Like paint us a little picture there.
I did go to the well, but I didn't walk to the well. It was right outside my house. But, I always think of myself as someone who had the best childhood. Because it was just, I grew up in the farm with animals and just, in a tiny community where everyone knows everyone, and I could just go play. Like I would leave the house as a kid at 8 a.m. and my grandmother would be like, just be home before the last chicken gets home. I'll be out running and playing with other kids in the village until either I was hungry or it was dark. The chickens were going home, and so I had to go home. And I always, so I feel like that was my life. My life was pretty, like, I would almost say small in so many ways, but very intimate. So I was surrounded by a community of people. And I guess like what I'm trying to say is like all those things, sometimes I want to say like all those things that people sometimes imagine what Africa is, it is what it is, but there's so much beauty in that we don't get to see. So
yeah, one of the things that's interesting is, when you live in a country, say like America, and you see images on TV of what it's like in Africa, they always show you the starving children, walking 10 miles to get water and that sort of thing. So they always paint this picture like it's a so horrible, terrible like place to live. But the reality is when they actually do studies and they study the kids to find out, like what kids had a happier childhood, they usually find out that the people growing up in places like Africa actually had a happier childhood than the people growing up in places like America, because they didn't have all the stress and they didn't have all the, the craziness of, what we call this more developed world.
And they had the community aspect.
And they had the community aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So it's really cool to hear you describe that and to say that you had a great childhood, because I think that's probably more the reality than people here in America are really told or shown.
Yeah, so true. I think like when people say, did you walk without shoes? I'm like, I did walk without shoes. I ran to school every morning, but that's not what as a child you care so much about. It's about the love that you get from your community and the support that you get. And so for me, even coming to the United States, it was coming from Kenya, but it was like I almost came with that trust that everyone's like that, so it was a huge adjustment, but I was just like, everyone's like back in the way Kenyans are, so it was almost there was an ease of assimilation or getting into the country almost naively, because I had that trust that came from my community.
That's a very interesting point that we probably won't go into now, but if you're listening, keep that in the back of your mind. It may come up again later in this conversation. So let's switch over and hear, Matthew, kind of your story.
So, I was born in Los Angeles and lived in several states throughout my childhood, and lived in 2 countries before this one dragged me off to Kenya a few years ago. So I lived in Mexico as a kid, and then also spent some time living in Germany. But, when I think about sort of my childhood and where we came from, and actually one of the things that you brought up in your intro was about, these cultural differences. But one thing that we have so much in common is that I also grew up with a very strong community aspect and a strong sort of family bond. Like I had a pretty similar experience even going out to play. The rule was just be home in time for dinner. So there's a lot of freedom and community. And so that was really where I came from, coming, we're in that. And so when I think about like, what are some of these compatibilities, what are the things that made us coming together so easy in some ways, and has brought a tremendous ease. Sure, it's our experiences. We weren't children when we got together. We had experiences, we had made mistakes, we had grown, we had been sad, we had been happy, we had all those things that we were able to learn from and grow from to bring that into our relationship. But when I go back and I think about interracial couples or any couples, and when 2 people come together, those challenges, what are what are all the places those come from? And what are the similarities where we have this touch point to say, oh, we can reset at this point. This is where we connect. That is something that was very similar, even though at 9, when she was 9, she moved to Nairobi. When I was 9, I left Los Angeles. So the first 9 years I was in Los Angeles and she was in a small village in Western Kenya. What completely different worlds. They could not be more different. Yet the community and the family support and love, that was so similar. And so, yeah, that's where.
So I always love to know how people meet. So you guys are in totally opposites. Then Cera comes to America, and that's where you guys meet. Like, how did you guys meet then?
I was on Tinder, dating on Tinder. And Matthew swiped left.
I was like, I did.
That
A
means
modern
no,
love story.
or that means right.
That means
That
no.
means
That
no.
means no. Okay. Well, I've never been on Tinder. Neither one of us has ever done online dating. So I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm getting it. And we're kind of like old age here, like old school. Okay. So that meant no. He swiped left.
That meant no. Okay, so I have to back that up. So we knew each other before that. So we had friends, mutual friends in common, and we had seen each other at friends' houses. So when he saw me on Tinder, like there's a rule when you see someone on Tinder. I've not been on Tinder. I don't know if it's like online etiquette. Thank you. That you just swipe left. You don't say anything. And so he saw me, and he was, what were you thinking?
Well, the only thing that really did, because I was like, okay, first of all, as she said, we'd kind of seen each other, but she looks very young. When we first met, she looked really, really, really young, such that it wouldn't have ever even crossed my mind to look in her direction. But when I was on Tinder, because I'd been, I saw her and I thought, well, definitely not. But I did notice that she wasn't as young as I thought she was. So I feel like that moment when I saw her on Tinder was basically just saying, I kind of tell this half joking and half serious. Like it was this reminder from like our pre-birth time of, hey, that's the person you've got to find. So it's like there was these little clues. It was like, it was like the breadcrumbs in Hansel and Gretel. You got to find your way to this person. And when we think of all these little tiny moments where we randomly connected, like briefly, not really connected, but saw each other in places where we really shouldn't have.
I was just randomly on another date, and I ran a couple afterwards. Like I ran into Matthew, and I was just like, hi, because I know him. And then I was like, we were like, we should get coffee and get to know each other. And then a couple days after that, I ran into him again, and we were like, okay, no one runs like into each other in LA, but we kept doing it, and we were like, we should really get together. And our mutual friend was like, let's get dinner. And
like we just went to kind of get to know each other. We never actually really had a conversation. So we did. And I got to be totally honest. I did not think I was going on a date. And that night I went home and I could not sleep. And I was like, okay, I really like her. And I'm going to back this up by saying about a week earlier, I decided I was really ready to go back into a relationship. And so I had pulled out my journal. I was in Death Valley for a little solo retreat. And I started journaling about what was going to be really important to me and a partner. That way, I didn't let my hormones and my sort of brain neurology decide. I was like, I want to be really conscious about this. And as I'm going home that night after we hung out, I'm thinking, wait a second. I think that I described this person when I was journaling, saying I'm finally ready for a relationship again. And so, the next day, it's like, oh, I know you're not supposed to call someone the next day or text them or whatever. And by about 3:00 in the afternoon, I was like, I can't. I was like, how about a hike this weekend? And anyway, that didn't work out. But a couple of days later, we hung out, and then our mutual friend invited us both out because she knew we were hanging out that day. She's like, oh, I'm going to take you guys out to eat. And so, and here we are several years later, and here we're going to stay. This is, you asked me then, you said, who am I going to go bald with? I would have said this one because that's it.
This is awesome. So before we move to like your first living experience together and kind of like the clashes that happens, I just wanted to pause for a second about the process that you went through, because it is something that we coach our clients when we work with one-on-one with our clients, about having that clarity about who you want to attract, and really writing it down is such an important element to saying like, I'm ready. These are my goals or intentions. Sometimes I prefer intentions over goals because it can be so rigid, but it has something so important when you write it down, you commit to it, and then that letting go. And I think that's also what happened for you. You did that same process. And then I came into you. Well, I already was in your life, but that's when I finally came into the
Yes, I had written a
dating
list.
one.
I had written a list of all the things that I wanted in a partner. And then when we came together, I was like, wow, that's a lot of stuff on the list. Actually, to this day, sometimes she'll say when, I notice something about her or comment about some way she is, she'll look at me and she'll go, was that on your list? No, but it's a bonus.
So tell us a little bit about the first, and that was awesome. Thank you for sharing your story. It was really fun. But I want to know about when you first lived together, like what was it like? And maybe, what were some of the things that you were like, ooh, this is not so easy. And then this worked easily.
So we like dated for what, 2 weeks. In 6 months we were living together. We moved in together, and Matthew is an amazing cook. And so he was doing I was in school, and so he was doing most of the cooking, and he would go to the store and buy all this food, which is what I call American food. I cannot eat salad for dinner. Absolutely not. Like, I eat salad for dinner and I just feel hungry. And I was just like, I was used to eating like, salad, maybe something warm. Like, I don't I don't enjoy cold food. And so it was nice because I wanted to be like, okay, I'm going to please him. But after a while, I started getting really miserable. If he made dinner, I just felt hungry. And then he would go to the store and buy food that I didn't even understand. And so there was this thing between us where I felt like he's making dinner and I should be appreciative and say thank you for making dinner. But it was food that I really did not like. And so it was like when we went shopping, we had to sit down and I had to say that I'm grateful for all that you're doing, but I don't like your food. I'm hungry.
That's such a big piece. Food. I'm a foodie, and I come from from Switzerland, from the French background, and it's definitely when we go visit my family, it's the biggest hurdle we always get. Like, issues with a friction with my family, because how we eat is a little bit different, and what we like and the quantities, and it's such an important piece. And I can see, like, if I tell my mom that I don't like what she made, it's nearly like if I'm telling her I don't love you. And so it can be such a big piece, because, and I know for me too, it's one way to express my love, to cook for somebody. So kudos for you to being able to bring it up in a way that could be heard. And then also I'm imagining that, Matthew, you guys found a common ground or kind of like shared what you liked and found a way to come to a place where you both felt appreciated and then felt good about the action of eating.
Yeah. And I think some of it was actually being able to have that conversation. And we've employed this a couple of times where we brought someone in from the outside to sit in council who could hold space for us to actually share and sort of and moderate or mediate. And that was really important, because I love that particular story, because I actually don't think I changed hardly anything. If anything, it was just to be heard. And obviously I changed a little bit because she felt like it was a world of difference. But to me, it was the tiniest little shift. It was adding one little extra thing to a meal once or twice a week or whatever it was. It was an acknowledgement of, this is hard for you. The way that is just natural for me doesn't feel natural for you. So when I fully acknowledge that, even if I'm like, that's ridiculous. And I can tell you right now, I didn't only make salad. You can't say I'm a good cook and I only make salad. That doesn't make any sense. but there was something to that, right? It was this, I have this different need. And if you can hear that and you can acknowledge it and you can make an effort towards that, then that was an issue that literally evaporated. It was a major issue. We had this council space where we talked about it. The issue evaporated completely. And she was like, she still thinks I made this huge difference. And to me, I felt like I changed virtually nothing. Now, obviously I changed enough, but I listened and I acknowledged it. Whereas before, I wasn't.
That's perfect, because that's the way it should be, right? The person who has the problem should feel like you made a big effort. And on your side, it should feel like it was easy to make that effort. That's how these things actually work, right? You know, it may have been big, it may not have been big, but it's the perception of the act that's really, truly important. And I think that, you know, it sounds sort of trivial because it's food or whatever. And I know for foodies, it's not trivial. I get it. But yeah, the learning lesson is that you can take how you handle that and apply it to all of the other differences and challenges that you might come across in a relationship also.
So we're going to do a little break for our sponsors. Today's sponsors is ANEROS. If you haven't heard yet about the ANEROS, we've been talking about it for the past few shows. Those are prostate massagers that can be enjoyed in many different ways to enhance the strength and pleasure of your orgasms. A healthy prostate means that you're able to have stronger, longer sex. Stronger, longer sex means you're able to have a healthy prostate. So ANEROS prostate massagers can be used for solo play or to enhance sex with a partner. The ANEROS gives you hands-free pleasure with the utmost comfort. To try it today, go to CelineRemy.com/go/prostate. And that's our affiliate link, CelineRemy.com/go/prostate. The link is in the description below too. And use our coupon code LOVELAB to get 10% off your purchase.
And your purchase supports the Love Lab podcast. And if you're like a prostate massager, I don't even know what the prostate is, please go listen to our episode on the prostate and prostate massage.
So let's talk about something unusual that you guys did in your relationship. So I love so far all the different elements and aspects that you've shared, but I know you did something very different, which Cera, you had mentioned prior to the interview that it felt that it was very important for your partner, for him to come and live in Kenya for a while, right? To experience your life. And that's something that you guys did. You guys moved, I think, for a couple of years or something like this to Kenya, right? So maybe tell us a little bit more about that process and why was it so important to you to have Matthew experience that? And then how was it for you, Matthew, to be immersed in that?
Yeah. For me, like, I knew that I wanted to move back home. And if I was going to have an American partner, I knew that I couldn't have long-term relationship with someone who wasn't wanting to move back to Kenya. So on our first date, I asked Matthew, like, would you move to Kenya with me? And he was like, yeah, sure. But I think for what I really wanted, I felt like living in Los Angeles almost was that I was living his life as he had known it as an American. And I just felt that for him to really know who I am, and he must also know where I come from and my people and the way and my childhood friends and my way of life. And so that was really important for me, that my partner was willing to also come and see who I was deep, in a deeper level. And so I think it was a year and a half of our dating. We moved to Kenya for almost 2 years.
Yep.
Amazing. And
yeah.
how was that for you? Because I get that. And as for me, that's why I always brought my partners to visit my family, but that was for weeks, and we go like every couple of years.
Weeks at a time. Yes, not years at a time.
So I'm like, this is like a total like new thing. So how was that for you? So such an immersion. Did you learn a different language? And tell us about that, Matthew.
That was a big jump to move. It also happened to coincide with the time in my life where I'd always expected that I was going to do a big trip. My plan had always been to ride my bicycle around the world at that same time. So I moved to Kenya was actually a less radical experience than what my otherwise plan had been. But I think one of the things that was, first of all, it was just amazing. It was eye-opening. It was all of these things. But as Cera said, I got to step in and see something that I never would have seen. And because her mother tongue is Kikuyu and her kind of second language is Swahili, which I didn't learn any Kikuyu, and I learned a little bit of Swahili. There were certain things that I started to pick up. And one of the great things in our relationship was certain sort of language things that are missing in a language. or the way people speak. You know, if like, for example, you go to the restaurant and you basically tell the waiter, give me water. And I'm thinking that is so rude, but it's not actually rude. They just, it's actually just very direct. And even just sometimes what I can perceive as the tone of voice is very kind of, direct in a way that makes me uncomfortable. And one of the things that had challenged us in our relationship before was I kept feeling like this woman is just bossing me around all the time. But and I don't want, I'm done being bossed around, but that she wasn't bossing around at all. I could actually, if I could just sort of translate that in my mind, there was no longer an issue. And I think one of the benefits that we have in our relationship is that because we come from these very, very different cultures, there was never that assumption that I understand where you come from, and I think also speaking from the idea of an interracial relationship or an intercultural relationship, sometimes we can assume that I understand, right? Like I also grew up, if she'd grown up in LA, so we both grew up in LA. Yeah, I was in the Valley. Maybe you were in a different part of town or whatever, but there would have been this assumption that we came from the same place. Therefore we know more than we actually do. And so that, to be able to be totally open in that way to say, I really don't know. And when I even think back on sort of past relationships, the amount of assumptions that I made was ridiculous because my family was so different. The expectations, the givens, the lowercase truths, the even capital T truths, right? Of like, this is a truth. And it's not, it's just the culture or the family culture that we each grew up in. And so in some ways, the one of the great things about our relationship is that we didn't come into it with this assumption that I know your story, I know your situation, I know the way you see things. And I almost feel like if we could in general bring that same sort of curiosity and sort of a real acknowledgement of the lack of knowing the other's experience, how amazing that will be for any relationship. And we just got that sort of, all of those assumptions were just stripped away from the very beginning, and talk about a huge gift.
Yeah, this is a wonderful point that you're bringing up that I just want to emphasize for the audience. Now, because you came from such different cultures, you did something that was very wise, which was really take time and not just time, but like take the step of literally living in each other's countries. But you really took the time to get to know each other, where you came from and what makes you who you are. Like, I love that example you gave of the language and how they would ask for something there being perceived as rude to us, even though they don't mean it in any rude way at all, right? There's so many layers of those little things that are different when you come from such different places that you need to learn. But what I also want to say to the audience is you could benefit so much even if you grew up on the same block, right? And I know that you have something to share about this too, because we talked about it in the pre-interview, but it's that idea that even if you didn't grow up on opposite sides of the world in opposite, cultures, every experience you've had has been unique to you, and your household, the way you grew up, even in your own household, is different than the household across the street or the town next to the town that you grew up with, or the state, or whatever it is. You can expand out as far as you want. So yeah, maybe tell our audience a little bit more about how that can apply and how those experiences can be different.
Well, I don't know. One of the things that we also did right at the beginning, Sarah was an avid reader, and fairly early on, I actually got jealous because she kept referring to these books that she had read, and I thought, she's read so much, I want to kind of catch up, and so we decided we were going to read a book together right at the right off the bat. And we chose a book that was called, I think it's called The Energy of Money by Maria Nemeth. And it's, we've neither of us were, we also recognize we're going to build a life together. Let's kind of bring awareness to money, for example. And the book turned out to have a ton of journaling in exercises and stuff to do. And so we're really able to spotlight, do these journaling prompts or whatever to kind of understand whether they were forgiveness prompts, something you're holding on to, blocking certain energy, things like that. And so we had this opportunity sort of accidentally. We didn't know that that's what we were getting into when we started reading the book, but it opened up all of these questions, and it's called The Energy of Money. But all of this stuff was just assumptions, assumption layers. And as we went through it, it was like, wow, there are just so many of these assumptions that we're living with. So, I think that was a clue into that for us, was these things that we might have thought were very simple or very basic, or just a given, and turns out, oh wow, that's not. You see that totally differently, and that really opened something up for us through that work.
Yeah, and just to reiterate again to the audience is that we all make assumptions based on our own upbringing and our own perceptions, right? And so it doesn't matter if you're an interracial couple, if you're from different cultures but the same race. It doesn't really matter. When two different people who've had two different life experiences come together, you have to be careful about making a lot of assumptions about who they are and what they've experienced and that sort of thing.
Very true.
Do you have any mistakes you've made? Like anything you're like, okay, people listening, don't do that. We did this, it didn't work. Like, can you think of any?
Well, I can think of one thing, particularly since the topic is around interracial couples. I had, so I mentioned something when she was working on her hair. I used the word kinky hair.
I remember that.
And she was like, don't use that word. I don't like that. And I was kind of taken aback because I felt like I was fairly aware. I try and pay attention to language. And so I went online to find out, like, what are other African-American women saying? Like, is that an okay word? And it turns out probably 90% of my, and I'm air quoting research here, was Black women saying, no, I mean, that's a perfectly valid way. That's what I call my hair, right? And then there were probably 10% that were like, nah, it's not cool. And at first I actually even went, I was like, well, I did a little bit of research here, and definitely in the minority.
She came to me and the internet is saying Black women are okay calling their hair kinky, and I was like, I don't care what the internet.
Yeah, but this is another example of one of those things where, like, Black people will use the N-word between each other, and they're like, we're totally cool with it. But people that aren't Black are just not allowed to go there. And so, yeah, that's one of those things where, yeah, sure, Black women on the internet are probably calling their hair kinky themselves. They just don't want anybody else to say it to them. So you have to respect that.
But even that, like, I hear, and I think that's a really valid point. The other part is that, and I think this was my big lesson, is that it actually doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, right? Like, she could be the only person who had a problem with it. And if she is the only person that has a problem with it, it's really not anything that I need a word I have to use. It's not anything. And I mean, if you ask us now, if this came up again, I don't even know if it would come up. And that could have also just been a part of our figuring out what is the language that we use with each other. Where are our boundaries? It was kind of part of this thing. But you know what? It doesn't matter what the internet says. It doesn't matter if you're the only one. If that's what's important to you, then that's a really easy give for me. You know what I'm saying? There are bigger things just to not use a word, even if everybody else says it's okay. So what?
Absolutely. That is a very valid point, is all that really matters is how she feels about that word.
Hey, I'm curious about
and I felt really honored when he finally was like, yeah, I will not use the word because I don't feel comfortable with my hair being referred to as kinky. And it's so much more than just the word, but actually feeling that my partner, I'm feeling seen and heard was what was important.
Absolutely. Here on the Love Lab podcast, we would like to offer to you, we use the word kinky in a completely different way.
So I'm very curious about the sexuality aspect. Did you have different expectations or different views around sexuality because of your cultural backgrounds that were so different? Or did you guys feel like you had similar expectations around sexuality?
I feel like I'm very open when it comes to sex, but Matthew is way open around sexuality. But I feel like the one thing that kind of almost shaped it was that we both come from Christian backgrounds. And I think there's something to that.
Could be, in that we both had to sort of overcome prudish cultures in order to be able to live a sexually free and thereby humanly free life, I guess, probably, yeah. So I think there is, I guess, yeah, were there differences? I mean, I think always in some ways, but there was also a real sort of open and mutual respect and curiosity. And, I kind of even like joked when we got together, there were certain things that would come up, whether it was around, around menstruation or anything that sometimes a lot of sort of contemporary or actually any, men might find like a little bit, wait, I don't want to know about all the details. I just want to go for the pleasure or whatever. And I think one of my lines early on was, I'm not a boy, I'm a man. I can
handle it.
There's nothing that is going to throw me off my game. I'm going to show up, and this is, we are humans. We have fluids, things aren't always clean and pretty and whatever. That part of the beauty of sex and the part of the beauty of humanity is the fact that it's not pristine. It's not quote unquote perfect. It's human, it's carnal. It's also spiritual. It's all of that. So I think that, that really played into a really sort of healthy coming together too.
So sex is a universal language.
So tell me, and as we're wrapping up this conversation today, I know you have a few things and a few tools, and I want to talk about that in a minute. But I want to know, what do you really love and appreciate about each other? What is one thing that you really love about each other?
Well, I'm just going to say, since we are on the topic, and then we're going to talk about it, we created the Lovers Journal, and the Lovers Journal came out a little bit from our some of the ideas started, as I mentioned, we started reading this book and then journaling about it, and the very first prompt is actually, what are 10 things that you admire about your partner, made you fall in love? And it's all written down, even though it kind of continues to grow and evolve. And I just realized I was going to read it, but I don't actually have that one with me. But things that I admire, I mean, I think one of the things is that I just absolutely love and admire about Cera is this amazing sense of humor, and a real openness and a desire also to live in question, there are times where we might even get into a little bit of a disagreement or an argument. And I love these moments where they come, and it's usually not right in the heat of the moment, but sometimes we'll go on a walk and she'll say, okay, I want to assume that you're totally right about this. And we kind of do that for each other. But I love that because that first of all means, we get to actually really explore where we're not fighting for our position, but being open for how do we grow. So when she does that, she's basically saying, I'm more interested in learning something or growing in this moment than I am about being right. And that also allows, when she can do that, it gives me the space to be like, and now you tell me that same thing. And now we both get to be in this place where we're not trying to be right or prove the other wrong or anything. We're actually saying, what can I get from this moment that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten? How can I be the person that wins this disagreement by being the person who learns something new, instead of winning this agreement by being the person who doesn't learn anything new because I'm proving you wrong and me right. and she does that so well. And that's pretty hard to top. It's like one of the most amazing things.
I think for me, one of the things that I really love about Matthew is we both have a very dark sense of humor that that some of the jokes that we make between the two of us, if other people, I remember making the joke in front of my mother and she literally almost had a heart attack. And she was like, I absolutely did not give birth to you. But there is something about the two of us that in the way that we speak to each other and we joke about around with each other is like, nothing is off limit. And I know that whatever I say or I joke about, I'm not going to be judged for. And so there's that trust in our relationship that whatever comes out of my mouth and we're joking is like, he's not going to use it to win an argument later on. And that is something that is really special about our relationship.
Amazing. This was such a powerful jam. Like rewind for the past 5 minutes and listen to that again, because you've got so many little things here to apply to your relationship.
There's quite a few things in there. I mean, if you didn't really quite get it, part of what Cera was just saying is safety. Right? That Matthew creates a safe space for her to be able to express herself and she doesn't fear any retribution for doing so. That's just one. There's like a whole bunch in there. Like Céline said, go back and listen to that again because there's some real gems in there.
So you've got a tool that you've created, that journal, where people can learn to do what you guys are doing together and go through that. And that's one way that you keep your love growing. And that's one way that you want to help the world and other couples to find more ease and grace and love in their relationship. So tell our listeners more about that journal. I know also that they can get it at loversunlimited.co. We'll have the link below, and that you've created a special coupon, LoveLab15, for them to get a 15% discount. So make sure that you use that and check out that particular journal, but entice them a little bit so that they go there.
And then we have one more very important question.
Oh yes, I'm not forgetting. Stay tuned. It's our favorite question. If you're regular to the Love Lab, you know what's coming and who's coming.
Well, let's see. So the Lover's Journal, I kind of like jumped the gun a little bit on the last piece of the conversation, but one of the things that about, I don't know, sometime last year, Cera, we were talking about just we've done really well in our relationship in a way that it's definitely surprised me. I mean, I've read enough relationship books, et cetera, to know that the challenges come, the neurology changes, the chemical cocktail that you get when you first meet somebody, eventually that shifts. And one of my very good friends is a therapist. And when Cera and I first started dating, I remember he was just like, "Oh, dude, you're in that phase. You're in the
honeymoon phase.
Chemicals going." And it's, and he's like, "It's cute. Like, enjoy it because it's not going to last." And here we are, pushing 5 years later, and it hasn't really gone away. It's really weird. And that's not to say we don't have our moments, because we do. We're humans. But so this question of like, wait, what are we doing right? And she used to call me the prophet of doom, because I would always say, this is coming to an end. This is coming to an end. I want to appreciate it while it's here.
It's not coming to an end. 5 years.
And so it was really kind of looking back is like, what's really been working for us? And there's a couple of those things. One was a real openness. One was this journaling that we accidentally did at the beginning. And Cera wasn't really a journaler, and I journal regularly, if not every day, several times a week on average, and have been doing it for many years. And so we kind of looked back over what we were doing and what have we been doing. And it sort of came together in the Lover's Journal. And the Lover's Journal, we have it in 4 different colors. And it's a series. It's basically 52 weeks of prompts with monthly challenges and beautiful quotes. And it really is a way to guide and weaving really kind of delicately between the things that we love. That's why I mentioned, right at the beginning, the first one, what are the top 10 things that made you fall in love with your lover? and then come those things of, the last time that you were in a challenge, look at it, write about it from their point of view. The last time that they hurt your feelings, write about it from their point of view. And then it kind of goes back. What are goals, mutual goals that you have? So it really weaves between the stuff that really enlivens. And, when you're writing and you're thinking, oh, I'm having these memories of this stuff that I love about my partner, my wife, my husband, my significant other. And then also, what are those challenges? And when we kind of set the space for it with real respect and love at the base of it, it makes it also okay to go into some of those, and safe. We used that word a minute ago, right? It's safe to go into the challenging areas because we've also created the opening for there's love at the foundation of this. And now in order to enhance that, we actually might have to go to some difficult places, but that's okay because love and mutual respect is there. So that was...
Every couple should get a lover's journal to focus on the positive, to get the tools they need to create that safe space and dive in deeper. So I think it's a prerequisite. So check out at loversunlimited.co.
And don't forget to use the Love Lab 15 coupon.
Yes.
Okay, so we are running way over actually, but we have to ask our last question. You each get an opportunity to answer this. It is our favorite question to end interviews with, and it is, what is your best sexual talent?
Oh my goodness. What's my best sexual talent? I give good blowjobs.
The great talent to have.
It is a very good talent to have in a partner.
Can I claim that?
You can absolutely claim that.
Okay.
You can absolutely claim it. Which is kind of funny because I'm going to give a little story with mine. When we first got together and it came so fast, her best friend said, you're not going to make it 2 weeks without having sex with this guy. And we had literally just met. And she said, yes, I will. And I was like, well, I'm going to help you win your bet. So I will, but we're going to say that oral sex is totally okay. So for 2 weeks, I just channeled my sexual energy and I just pleasured her. That
was off my first 2 weeks of the
first 2
introduction.
weeks, that's all that happened. And so I think that somewhere in there that became a defining part of our sexual experience. And so I would probably have to say oral sex is probably pretty high up on my list.
On your skill level.
On
Amazing.
my skill level.
Yeah,
Well,
I give you.
I hear satisfaction, which is very important. Matthew and Cera, it was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for sharing. Where can our listeners find more of you if they want to follow your work?
Well, generally at loversunlimited.co, our podcast is linked there too. It's the Interracial Couple Podcast, which is found anywhere where you listen to podcasts. We also blog at loversunlimited.co. Instagram is where we are at this moment, social media wise, most active at Journal for Lovers. And yeah, generally we are pretty easy to find. Cera has a company called EcoDunia, which is ecodunia.com, and I'm at matthewctemple.com. But generally, we're easy to find in the world.
Awesome. We'll have all the links in the description below.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for coming on the show. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having us.
It has been a mutual pleasure. It's been, the way pleasure's supposed to be.
Mutual.
That's right. All right, everybody. That's all the time we have for this episode, and we will see you next week.
All righty.
We hope you liked this episode of the Love Lab podcast. If you enjoy this show, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends.
And for more free, exclusive content, join us in the Passion Vault at CelineRemy.com/vault. That's CelineRemy.com/vault.
Thanks for listening.
And remember, you're amazing.